Let's discuss about the principal and agent concept. So, an investor controls an investee when it has power over the investee. It has exposure and right to the variability return. It may be plus or it may be minus from its involvement with the investee, and it has ability to use its power over the investee to affect the amount of return. So, when we are assessing the control, in that case, an investor with the decision making rights will determine whether it is a principal or it is acting as an agent. So, an investor that is an agent that does not, it means it does not control the investee. So, we need to define, every investor need to define whether it is acting as a principal or it is acting as an agent when it is taking decision making, when the decision making rights have been delegated by the investors to that entity or party. So investors will determine whether other party with the decision making right is acting as an agent for the investors, and an agent is the party that is primarily engaged to act on behalf and for the benefit of other party or more than one party. So the agent does not control the investee because it is acting on behalf of other parties when it is exercising its decision making authority. And the investor shall treat the decision making rights delegated to its agent as held by the investors directly. So we need to check who is behind that agent, who is the actual owner of the investee. Similarly, in situation where there is more than one principal, we need to assess each of the principal separately whether it has power over the investee or not. Second, the investor shall assess overall relationship between itself, investee, and other parties in determining whether it is an agent. So when we are determining the agent, there are four principles. We need to check about the scope of decision making authority. So, if the activity is permitted by the agreement and specified by the law, or discretion that decision maker has when it is taking decision about those activities. So, based on that, we will decide. This is one of the four factors where, while taking coming on the conclusion whether the party is agent or principal. Second is the right held by the other parties. For example, if other parties have rights substantially to remove the acting party, it may indicate that it is working as an agent. But if the single party in isolation can remove without any cause, so it is sufficient to conclude that it is an agent. However, if the number of parties increase to work for the removal of the decision maker, in that case, it is of indication that it may not be an agent, and we need to check about the different factors like remuneration, etc., and other economic interest associated with that party to decide whether it is an agent or principal. So the less weightage will be given to the removal fact that the right of removal is held by the other party if removal cannot be in isolation and involvement of more than one party is required. And similar way, we need to check the other restriction rights for the discretion. Those are held by the parties. Next is the remuneration. We need to check the greater the magnitude and variability to the returns that are attached with the decision making rights and with the remuneration of acting party, it is more like that it is working as a principal. So higher the magnitude and variability of the return, the chances of principal uh, being defined as principal are higher. So we need to consider the commensurate remuneration and the remuneration agreement that include only the customary terms and conditions while deciding whether it is a principal or agent. And next, fourth factor is we need to check about the exposure to the variability of return from other interests. So here we need to check the holding interest that indicate it may be a principal. So we need to consider that again similar way, the greater the magnitude associated with the variability change, chances of principal are higher, and whether its exposure is different from others and might influence its action. So we need, when we are judging a party and whether it is working acting as an agent or principal, we need to check all these four factors and give a weightage differently to each factor based on the situation of the case.